I was very food insecure and impoverished as a child. Came from an absolute abject level of poverty. So music to me and my guitar that I got when I was 9 years old, I really did see as my ticket out of all that. And that's why I dove so hard into it, because it was my escape from the situation I had at home, which was not good.
My guest today is musician, book and magazine publisher, and artist Mike Lawson, who also happens to be my book publishing champion. Mike was the person who took a chance on me to publish my first book, and then most of my subsequent 20-plus books after that. He's since gone on to become the owner and publisher of notable publications like School Band and Orchestra and Musical Merchandise Review magazines. If those credits were Mike's only claim to fame, it would be pretty substantial. But he's also continued to be a working musician, having recorded and or performed at musical luminaries like Merl Saunders, Vassar Clements, John McEuen, Bob Welch, Phil Keaggy, Jack Casady, Michael Cleveland, and a host of others. He's also released 8 albums as Mike Lawson and Friends, continues to front his tribute band Hooterall, and even has his own Pearl River signature guitar. During the interview, we spoke about transitioning from musician to publisher, staying on the bleeding edge of technology, his stints at Gibson, his journey to getting a signature guitar, and much more. I spoke with Mike from his office outside of Nashville. Let's talk about your signature guitar and how that happened, because that's not something that every guitar player encounters.
Kind of crazy. So I've been friends with Peter Giles from Yamaha for like 30-something years. He started doing some work when he left Yamaha, Pearl River in China, who are the world's largest piano manufacturer, and they make really stellar, high-end, amazing pianos, and of course they make cheap stuff too. And they had wanted to come to the US with guitars, and so Peter had introduced me to their U.S. representative, Ling Shuat. They put up a website with Pearl River guitars, but there's no info about them, prices, anything. I emailed Ling. I said, what's going on? What are you guys doing? What is this? I'm a guitar player. That's what we do. And he told me what they wanted to do, and I said, I'd be happy to give him my opinion, but send me your very best two, the most expensive, best ones you have in the line, because if I find a problem here, I'm going to find a problem all the way down. So send me what you think is your very best. And they did. They sent a couple, and they, first of all, sounded great, played great. I was really surprised, but they had some things that needed to be buttoned down. That advice to them kept them from sending a container over here and taking a reputation that was otherwise unknown. So they didn't have a bad reputation. They didn't have a reputation at all. They always could have if these had gotten to the stores the way they were. That led to them asking me to perform at the party they had at NAMM in 2024. So I did. And on a handshake, they said, hey, we want to bring you to China to perform some festivals and do some shows. And we would like to talk about some signature models. And I'm like, sure, yeah, okay. I fly home from NAMM, and I'm like telling my wife, Shannon, hey, I think we're going to China sometime this year. And sure as heck we did. So in August, they flew me over last year, 2024, performed some shows. Had a Chinese band backing me. It was spectacular. And the next morning, I'm in a meeting room with their luthier team, their top technicians, and the chairman of the entire company, Chairman Lee. And about 10 minutes into it, he stands up and he points at me and says something in Chinese, waves, and walks out. And I'm like, oh God, what just happened, And he apparently had said to my colleagues there, I've heard enough. You give this man whatever he wants.
Wow.
Really? Okay. So I said, can you use nitrocellulose lacquer? First and foremost, because if you can't do that, we got nothing to talk about. They said, absolutely. Chairman Lee says whatever you want. I said, okay, good. I want Grover locking machine heads. I want Fishman electronics. I want Stringjoy strings from Nashville. I'm really pushing it now, right? Sitting in Guangzhou, China, asking for Stringjoy. The woods were a given. They have their own log mill. So it's all solid rosewood backs and sides, solid spruce top, one-piece mahogany neck, ebony fretboard on one, rosewood on the other. I mean, everything I asked for. That was August of last year. In September, they reached out and said, hey, the guitars will be ready if you want to come debut them at Music China in Shanghai. I just left like 7 weeks ago. What do you mean they're ready? So they're ready. So, Bobby, I'm flying all the way over, and every bit of experience I have working with manufacturers over in Asia, every bit of experience of discussions with friends who've gone over on behalf of Epiphone and other companies to train the workers there to make quality instruments was going through my head. Oh God, what if they messed up this? What if they messed up that? What's going to go wrong? I get to Shanghai and they're perfect.
Wow.
They're literally perfect. And I didn't really get to hear them till the last night in Shanghai when I got them back to the hotel, because I was flying the very first two back to the US with me. And I was blown away. So that's how it happened. They're Pearl River guitars. A lot of people have got this misconception that maybe I'm making Mike Lawson guitars and importing them. I'm not. I designed two, and they're my signature models. And yeah, it's not something I had, on my bingo card.
Well, hey, it's nice when something like that happens, especially when it's unexpected like that.
Oh, Bobby, I've been getting paid to play my guitar. I'm 56 now, and literally for over 40 years, every year of my life, I've been handed money to play my guitar. And I made a couple of points to Pearl River that were really important to me. Number one, I'm not famous. I play with a lot of famous people, and that's a big distinction. I'm not doing this because I'm a famous guitar slinger in the U.S. I'm a working musician, and I have been for 4 decades, a working everyday musician. Maybe some of those everydays were a lot bigger than others, and others were very normal working musician gigs. And we have to make something that is stellar quality, that has all of these points, but it has to be affordable for 21-year-old Mike Lawson, who struggled with intonation and strings breaking and poor construction and crappy electronics and everything else that I could not afford. But I was working 5, 6, 7 nights a week sometimes in the late 80s and early 90s. So that's what they did. And I'm just blown away to get to do this. So it's really about making a world-class instrument for guys who are going to throw them in the back of the car and go play at the pub the rest of their lives that they can afford.
Let's talk about you gigging every day for most of your life. And what I'm curious about here is that you've done so many other things, and you're doing so many other things. And how we met was not as you as a player or even me as a player. It's, in another realm here. So I kind of want to explore how that happened, because I know that you were a gigging musician. Then all of a sudden you're in another part of the business. So let's explore how that happened. So take me back to where you started.
So 1991, I had my first child on the way, and I went, oh God, I can't be on the road every day and gone all the time. I've got a baby. What an awesome responsibility. I'm going to move to Nashville to not be a musician. So I did. I moved to Nashville in 1991 to try to get into the music publishing, songwriting side of things, but not be in a van or a bus or a car 7, days a week. And I got up here, I found out that publishing songs was a fast way to make a slow dollar. And that wasn't going to work. So the following year in 92, I went to South by Southwest when it was still in the Hyatt, in a ballroom for displays, and, the conference rooms upstairs for seminars and stuff. And I met this guy selling a legal contract library out of his backpack that he had velo-bound, comb-bound at Kinko's and stuck a disc in the back of, and it was all these legal contracts for musicians, from recording agreements to booking agreements, just everything you could think of in template form for computers. Now, I didn't actually own my own computer. My business partner had a Mac, but I didn't really use it. But I knew it was a good idea because I needed it, because I was a working musician. I'm like, yeah, I don't need to pay an attorney to write a booking contract. Here is one. If I don't understand it, yeah, I should ask a lawyer, but I understand this. I'll play here. I'll get paid. This is what's going to happen. Boom. That's a great idea. So I came home from South by Southwest, went upstairs in my office at 30 Music Square West, the old RCA building, and my dear late friend Steve Moore was a young attorney. And he said, Mike, this is great. I can use this every day. It's great. So yeah, I know I want to publish it, but I don't. He's like, how much money do you need? I said, I think I need about 10 grand. So his dad was a surgeon down in Meridian, Mississippi. And he called his dad, and his dad loaned me 10 grand and invested in it. And I published the Entertainment Source Library. My biggest seller at the time was a reseller was Mix Bookshelf from Mix Magazine. And so they were selling it for a couple years. Around that same time, I had to get a computer because my business partner moved on, took his Mac with him, and the only support calls I got were from MS-DOS people. And I didn't know anything about it. So I went down to Office Depot and I bought a 286 SX25 Packard Bell computer, and I went back to my office, which by then was at the old UA Tower in Nashville on Music Row, and I taught myself to use it, and it came with a card from CompuServe. I'm like, what's that? I've heard of this. So I logged in to CompuServe for the first time and kind of had this epiphany about what was going to come with the digital age. Long story short, I went to CompuServe in Columbus, Ohio, and I convinced them to let me start the music industry forums. My vision was tour schedules, bios, discographies, and live online chat interviews with musicians, because the longer I could keep people connected to CompuServe, which was a metered $25 an hour service, the more money I was going to make. So I'm publishing this software thing. I'm putting up manually 30 seconds of the best part of each song I could find. Record labels I signed up to this were sending me boxes of CDs. And I would sit with a boom box that would go from the audio out to the mono in of this machine and make 8-bit 11K 30-second sound clips of songs to put up, which, by the way, became the norm for previewing music and online stuff. And I would let them upload. Long. It was a massive amount of work. And then I'm doing that. I'm having a good time. I'm also on the road at the same time. I ended up going back on the road, this time with Tom Wopat from the Dukes of Hazzard, because I had to buy diapers, and so I'd take any gig I could get. So I'm staying pretty busy. And even back then, Bobby, I'm multitasking, right? I got the publishing thing started. Starting this CompuServe when people were scared to death of online anything with music. And I'm on the road again. And then I went and formed a band doing Grateful Dead covers because they were huge again, and I was getting paid tons of money to go play frat houses. So lots of irons in the fire. The bookshelf was doing so well with the product that, and it was getting time to update it because Windows was starting to get popular. And I ended up selling the rights to the Entertainment Source Library software to Mix Bookshelf, to Mix Magazine's parent company. And I went to work for Gibson Guitar for about 3 years, where I put them on CompuServe and then spearheaded their build out of the Gibson.com. For many years, I was Mike at Gibson.com. And we were the first company to have a website that wasn't like hardware, software, MIDI, computer music based. So I've kept my hands in this and everything the whole time. During that period, I was making my first album and having friends of mine that I'd work with perform on it. So I've always been juggling many, many things. It's probably my ADHD.
Yeah, we all have it. How did you get to Mix Books?
So I'm working at Gibson, and I'm not making a lot of money, but I'm having a great time. I'm hanging out with Pink Floyd and Three Cities and the Eagles and Aerosmith and Grateful Dead and just all these heroes of mine, and I'm having a really good time. And during my years at Gibson, one of the things I had to do was work really hard to make the dealers happy, because the dealers hated Henry, the owner. They hated him. And my job was to try to buffer that and make them happy. So I pitched this Gibson.com thing, start building it out. All of the district sales managers are having a fit. Oh my God, the rumor is we're going to start selling direct. Oh my God, oh my God. I'm like, don't worry. No, it's a beautiful, interactive marketing machine catalog. We're going to do all this fun stuff. We're not selling direct. It's not what I'm doing. And besides, Bobby, there was no such thing as PayPal. There was no transaction systems. We were meeting with people called Cyber Wallet and stuff that never happened. So I guess it was fourth quarter of 95, I get called to Henry's office, and he brings me in his office, makes me wait 2 hours, finally get in about 7 at night. And he says, I want you to, e-commerce next year is going to be $1 billion industry. And I want you to build a mall on our site. I'm like, what? To do what? What are we going to sell? Our products? Our products, other people's products, everything. I'm like, oh, crap. I know there's not a payment system. I know there's no way. I know SSL, secure socket layers, SSL, had just started, right?
Yeah.
It was very primitive times to do this. I had just done something beautiful and built this website where in August of 95, I did a live interview like we're doing now with Chris Christopherson sitting next to me with IRC chat questions coming in from around the world, streaming video from See You, See Me video, and the alpha version of Real Audio streaming it. I was cobbling this stuff together. This was my beautiful marketing baby. And he suddenly says I have to turn it into a profit center selling products. And I went, oh no. He's literally setting me up to fail. So I did what I was told because I had by then a second child and needed to buy diapers. And I started reaching out to people that I thought might want to be in our mall. And of course, I called our old friend Brad Smith at Mick's Bookshelf, who was out the door heading to Hal Leonard at that point. His replacement came in and didn't stay for very long. So I'm in the middle of doing this deal with them to put the Mick's Bookshelf on the Gibson site and resell their products for them. And they call me and say, hey, Mike, our GM left, and do you know anyone who might be interested? I'm like, I might be interested. My friend Brad Burkhart had sold them the recording industry source book business. So I called Brad and I said, hey, Brad, how much are they paying you? And he told me. And I called them back and told them exactly what I wanted, and it was exactly what he was making. And I went to, between Christmas and New Year's of 95, I flew to Philadelphia, met with the people there. 2 days later was offered the job and a relocation to San Francisco. I called Merl Saunders and said, I'm moving to San Francisco. He said, good, we gonna make some music. I'm thrilled to death. I go to Henry's New Year's party and I tell him, February 1st, I was out the door.
Mixed books. Yeah. Okay.
Well, that was the offshoot of it. The catalog business was waning. However, they wanted to start a book imprint. And again, I didn't know anything about publishing books, but I didn't know anything about publishing software either. I didn't know anything about publishing websites until I did it, or CompuServe until I installed it, right? But I knew what I needed. I knew what I wanted. So the success was that I was the target audience. Why? Because I'm a working musician. I needed a book on mixing. Who can I find who can write a book on mixing? And there's this guy working over at the competing magazine who's like, hey, I could do a book on mixing. Is it okay that I work at EQ? And here we are.
Yeah. Well, the thing, and I always tell everybody that you're my publishing guru, my champion.
I always will.
Because I didn't know anything about publishing either. When I wrote the Mixing Engineer's Handbook, I wrote the whole thing, not knowing that that's not the way it works. Usually it's a table of contents in a chapter or two. And there was no books on mixing at the time. And it was interesting because the people that I talked to said, well, you can't write one on mixing because it's too subjective. And I thought, well, I'll do it anyway. And I sent it out to 5 publishers, and all 5 wanted it. But you were the most aggressive, and you made the most sense. Whenever I talk to you, it's like, oh, yeah, okay, we can do something together. And the funny thing is, one of the publishers didn't really contact me until after the book was out. And contact me, says, "Oh yeah, okay, now let's do it." It's like, "Oh wait, you're a little late on this."
Well, Bobby, I always looked for stuff that would be useful to me as a musician. If you remember this point in time, this is 1996. All right.
Yeah.
And had just finished up recording in Nashville on the very first hard disk recording system in Nashville, my first album. And it was on a Spectral digital hard disk system.
Oh, geez, I remember those.
Yeah, very few do. There's not even anything on the internet about them, right? And so I had a vision for what was coming, and the ADATs had just started to hit the scene. And what was happening in Nashville in the mid-90s when the ADAT came out is that songwriters and people getting advances suddenly weren't going to the local studio to cut their writing demos. They were buying an ADAT, a Mackie mixer, and a microphone and some speakers. And that was another little epiphany where I was like, oh, wow, this gear's all coming out. People are going to want to know how to use it. I want to know how to use it. My only experience really had been with a 4-track, cassette recorder at home recording. And I thought, wow, I can make CD quality in my house for a $2,000 deck. Yeah, this is going to be huge. So when they said, do you want to move here and start a book imprint branded with Mix magazine? Yeah. And then I just literally started thinking, what do I need to know? What do I wish I'd known? As you said, books on mixing, there weren't many. Well, the ones that there were written at a college level.
Yeah.
Way out of my league. And I knew that, no offense, drummers, we needed books drummers would understand. We needed to bring this down so that the guy shopping at Guitar Center buying his first ADAT and mics could read and comprehend it. And that's what we did.
Okay, so that aside, you had a long tenure in publishing, which is still going on, but in book publishing. And you went from Mix Books to, was it Thompson? And then to Alfred? Was that the sequence?
I bought Mix Books from Mix Magazine's then owners and formed Artist Pro Publishing. Ran it for about 4 years and flipped it for a shiny nickel to Thompson Learning. I hated them with a passion. It was an awful decision, but I had investment partners who had a right to take an offer within a 5-year earnout, and it was like year 4.4. What are you going to do? You got danced with the devil. We sold the company. I had a 2-year deal with Thompson I had to do books in, but I was miserable because they didn't have any Elvis in them. There was no impetus, or they weren't publishing books for the same reason I was. Right? They were widgets to them. So I got out of there as quick as I can, and I went straight over to Hal Leonard. I stayed at Hal Leonard for about 3 or 4 years. I have a show and tell piece. The final book I signed for Hal Leonard was this, Jim.
Yeah, that's a good one, huh?
I consider one of the pinnacle moments of my career, at least leading up to that one. But I left Hal and I went back to Gibson for about 2 weeks. I thought it would be longer than that, but that's how Henry works. And he threw a lot of money at me to come back and leave publishing. So I did, but I said I want a 6-month severance deal because in 2 weeks you might not like me.
Funny how that works too, huh?
Funny how that works out, especially when you're dealing with somebody like that. So within 6 weeks or so of that, I got a call from Ron Manis at Alfred, who, said, hey, this sounds real interesting. And then Christmas Eve, literally, of that year, 2008, I got an offer agreement from Alfred. And at the same time, I'd signed a deal with Thomas Nelson, the Christian publisher here, to do 5 or 6 books on music technology inside of houses of worship and churches. So suddenly I go from leaving Hal Leonard, disaster at Gibson, 2 fat book deals. And I stayed with Alfred up until, I guess, 2016 or so, 2017, something like that. Over 200 books and videos in my career.
That's a lot. That's a lot.
You did half of them.
It seems that way, huh? Okay, so in the meantime, after that, you did make another turn, and that's into you're still in publishing, but now more in magazines with now MMR and SBO and Choral Directory Magazine, and there's probably some others in there. Jazzed, I think, right?
We're just down to SBO, which is now SBO Plus. I combined Choral and Jazz into one because post-pandemic, people were deciding they'd advertise in one magazine, but not three. And at the end of the day, I learned that music teachers have to teach everything. They get voluntold at the beginning of the year, hey, I know you're the choir teacher, but this year you're teaching guitar. This year you're also teaching band. And they're like, well, I'm a choir teacher. Yeah, but you're certified to teach music. And that's all the admin has to say. And then they have to go figure out how to teach it. So I decided to combine them. That happened also as a result of my first South by Southwest in 1992, where I'm sitting at a table in the Hyatt next to Terry Lowe, who was working for Polestar and Performance Magazine, touring directory, stuff like that. And I'm sitting there showing this software, the first guy to ever have a computer and phone line put at a booth at South by Southwest. I'm showing my software and CompuServe. And Terry and I became friends. And when I got to Mix, he was working for Mix selling ads. And he left and started Pro Lighting Staging News and Front of House magazine. And he bought MMR and Choral Director and Jazz Ed and SBO. He really just wanted MMR, but he had to buy all of them. And I ran into him summer down 2014 and said, hey, the book business is kind of softening quite a bit. And I think I've done all I can do there. If you ever need any help with the magazine, give me a call. I've got a special affinity for music education. I've been executive director of Time for 14 years now. We just turned 30, technology and music education. And I've been involved with it for 28 years now. And so I'm like, I've got a heart for this. If I can help, call me. And a couple of months later, he did. And long story short, pandemic ends. He's tired of publishing that many magazines and called me one day and in so many words said, you're buying the magazines.
And here we are. You're a publisher again. Yeah. Okay. But despite all that, you've been a player all the way through and you never stopped.
Never stopped.
And it's funny because all of us start as players and some of us do stop and are sad about it and decide to come back later and others never do. But you've kept on, and you've played with so many really great players. You mentioned Merl Saunders and Phil Keaggy, right? And Jorma and Jack.
If you don't know Jorma, you don't know Jack, as they say. Bob Welch. I just recently was fortunate to have Tony Visconti on a track with me. Pete Sears. Gary Talley from the Box Tops. What a fun, man. I'm like a huge Box Tops fan, and I'm like, I knew Gary for a while, and I'm like, I really want to cover Soul Deep, and I know it was a hit for you guys, and would it be weird to ask you to play on it? He's like, oh, I'd love it. So we did, yeah, man, I've had a really fun life, and I decided about 6 years ago, that I needed to start recording again and not just doing gigs and playing. So the first thing I did, let me back up a second if I can. When I got to San Francisco a year or so later, my daughter had stopped talking. She was about 3 and she was diagnosed with autism. So one of the main reasons I did not tour or go out on the road to support that first album, Ticket to Fly, was I needed to figure out how to take care of this little girl. Right. And so that was a big turning point for me. So I promoted the record for a while. Merl Saunders released it on his Sumertone label with Red Distribution. It was, legit out in the stores and all that. But I couldn't go out and tour because I really had to learn what autism was and how to deal with this world that was suddenly facing in front of me. And so I kept writing and I kept doing demos. And because of your books and all the others I published and had to read so I could learn this stuff, I kept writing and recording demos at home. And then around 19, I guess it was, what year is 2019? I said, it's clean slate time. The last album came out in 98. It's like 20 years. When did that happen? My daughter is full grown. My kids are all grown out of school. I have a really nice home recording studio. I said, okay, it's tabula rasa time. So I took all of the writing demos that would have been the next two Mike Lawson and Friends albums had I not had to go be a responsible father. And I released them, warts and all, as volume 2 and 3, because the first album was called volume 1, and there was a plan to do 3 originally. And I put them out, warts and all. I don't care. Bad recordings, it doesn't matter. This is what was on my mind. This is what would have been on the albums. And I put them out as some songs in the key of Poe and another one called Outtakes and Oddity. And then I sat down to start recording for real, the next series. And I'm on, I think, my 5th or 6th right now. Since then, I don't know. I put one out every year now because I can. The rules have changed, Bobby.
Yeah. And, it's funny. I told you this. You sent me a track and I listened to it and I thought, how did you get George Harrison on that record? And because it sounded like George was there. It was great.
I tell you, man, the theory that I take is that if you want to get some traction, like on YouTube or something, I do half covers, half originals. And I do that on purpose. Number one, there's nothing wrong with doing cover songs. I love cover songs. They're the reason I'm a working musician. Beatles did covers. The Stones did covers. I can do covers. And I only do songs I love and I've always wanted to do, or I've played live for years. And that way you search The Thrill Is Gone and you find B.B. King, but you find me with Grammy winner Michael Cleveland killing it for 8 minutes on this acoustic kind of Latin vibe thing that's, pretty cool, if you ask me. That has kind of been the philosophy behind it. And then COVID hit. Suddenly musicians couldn't work and I couldn't have people over to record, and it was a different world. So I found the site airgigs.com and I started hiring musicians all over the world. And that almost became an addiction because it was like, oh, I'm writing, I'm producing something. I'm like, God, I really always wanted to have strings, like real strings, not like me futzing around with my Nord over here, but strings. Suddenly I could. There were string arrangers who couldn't work, who were happy for $100 to write an arrangement. And there was a string player who was happy to make $100 to play all the parts. And I hired, probably close to 200 sessions on there over the last couple of years. And it's just been really phenomenal to sit around and look and go, wow, I've got all this stuff here, all these resources, all this equipment, and I've got access to really great players all over the world. So I work routinely with people from England to Argentina to Europe to just everywhere. So what great time to be alive and be a musician, right?
Well, the thing about it is you're always on the cutting edge. You always have been, and you are now. I know that you were one of the first people to jump into a slate Raven. And, that's pretty cutting edge as far as I'm concerned.
I like the real estate of the screens.
Yeah.
To be honest with you.
Yeah, well, it certainly works for you. I know it does. You have great stuff that you do. So
thank you.
That's the
I learned from
the results are in what's the, I forget what the phrase is. It doesn't matter, but you get great results. Okay, here's something I'm really curious about. So, what don't people know about you that you wish they did?
I suffer from an immense imposter syndrome. No, it's to an almost crippling effect at times. And I'll give you a good example. In 98, turning 99, New Year's Eve, I'm playing a show where the opening act is Canned Heat, Harvey Mandel. It's the Maritime Hall in San Francisco. I'm on the bill with Merl Saunders. that night, Bill Kreutzmann from the Dead played drums with us the entire show. Tim Gorman, all these great musicians guesting that night, Vince Welnick, and all these great players. And after us is Toots and the Maytals. What a bill, right?
Yeah.
And I'm on stage, and maybe I'd imbibed a little bit before the show, which maybe isn't the best thing to do, but it's San Francisco and it's New Year's. And I'm on stage, and I kind of had this little panic attack from it. Like, oh my God, that's Jerry Garcia's drummer over there. And that's Jerry's keyboard player. And holy crap, I'm just this guitar player from Panama City Beach, Florida. And someone's going to rush the stage and go, hey, what's that guy doing here? And I'm having just like this head trip going on in one part of my head. And the other part of my head hears Merle say, Michael Lawson, which meant play your solo, boy. At the moment, I realized he had adjusted it a half step, but I started in the right key. And while that's happening, my hands playing the solo, and I went back and listened to the tape, and I nailed it. But in the moment, Bobby, I didn't deserve to be there. I wasn't supposed to be there. I don't belong here. I'm scared to death. It was almost crippling. So no one saw, but on the inside, and I still have those moments, and that's after 40 years of playing guitar, where it's like, am I supposed to be here?
Well, that goes around. You'd be surprised the number of people I've had in the podcast, very famous in different parts of our industry, that would say the same thing. And I'd ask them that, and they'd say, people don't know that I'm afraid that I'll be found out.
Yeah, you nailed it.
Yeah.
That's exactly it, man. The first time I stood on the stage in front of, 60,000 people at the Haight Street Fair with Merle, and I'm just looking out there going, here it comes. And one of these hippies saw me in a Dead cover band at some frat house in Alabama 6 years ago, and it's going to be up here, yelling. It's the things that go through your head, that's a real thing. That's something most people don't know. I think something else is that I was very food insecure and impoverished as a child. Came from an absolute abject level of poverty, with quasi middle class trappings on the outside, but not inside. So music to me, and my guitar that I got when I was 9 years old, I really did see as my ticket out of all that. And that's why I dove so hard into it, because it was my escape from the situation I had at home, which was not good. It's pretty bad. So those are things that I don't advertise, but those are things you got out of me tonight.
Yeah. Okay, one last thing then. That's the last question for you. What's the best piece of advice that maybe you learned along the way, or maybe somebody imparted to you?
Well, I'm going to go to the words of Merl Saunders first and Vince Welnick second. Vince, separate story, but with Merle, February 1st, 96, I flew to San Francisco. I've been in town 3 hours. He comes and picks me up, takes me to dinner, and we're sitting there, and he says, we're playing this weekend. I said, yeah, no, I'm going to come see you. He goes, no, we playing this weekend. I'm like, what? He goes, yeah. I said, like, Merle, do you guys ever rehearse before the show or get together? And he looked at me like I was crazy. And this is the best advice, and I give it to every musician I talk to now, especially young ones. He said, Mike, you rehearse at home. You come to the show and play.
Yeah, I like that.
When you're not sure, turn down. When you are, turn up. If I say your name, play a solo. I'll see you Saturday.
I love it.
He threw me directly in the deep end of the pool. And it was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. And the other piece of advice came from Vince Welnick when he was explaining to me, he had tried to take his life once before, and he did not succeed the first time. And I said, what were you thinking? I don't understand. I want to understand what you were thinking. And he said, Mike, you're not supposed to understand.
Yeah.
Because if you understood, you'd think it was a good idea. Now, that's real heavy in terms of suicides. And you know that I've had to deal with those with Bob Welch, my other late best friend, and folks. But I've applied that so many places in my life. Like when I look at the political things going on and I go, I don't get it. How does anybody side with this? And I remember, oh yeah, I'm not supposed to understand. So those are the things, man. The one is just play, show up and play, rehearse at home, show up and play. And the other is, if you don't understand, maybe you're not supposed to, and that could be a good thing. And that's, two of the go-to things for me when I'm talking to people.
Quite excellent. Very good. That's a good place to stop, Mike. Thanks for listening and being in my inner circle. Remember, if you have any questions or comments, you can send them to questions@bobbyowsinski.com. You can also learn all about the latest in music, audio, and production news, and find out about openings for my latest online classes at bobbyowsinski.com. This is Bobby Owsinski. I will see you next time.